In an era when horror films competed to see who could deliver the most shocking gore, one movie dared to whisper instead of scream. Alejandro Amenábar crafted a ghost story built on silence, shadows, and psychological tension rather than violence. The film's power came from what it withheld, not what it showed, and its devastating twist reframed every scene that came before it. Nicole Kidman delivered one of her most haunting performances, channeling genuine fear that began long before cameras rolled. Behind the scenes, the production faced unexpected challenges, from language barriers to eerie incidents on set that blurred the line between fiction and reality. What follows are the secrets that reveal how this modern masterpiece was made. And it all begins with a bold decision that defied everything horror audiences expected at the time. Number 1. A horror film with no blood. The decision to eliminate gore entirely wasn't just unusual for 2001, it was almost unheard of in mainstream horror. Amenábar deliberately stripped away every element audiences had come to expect from the genre. No violent deaths appeared on screen, no graphic imagery disrupted the mood, and not a single drop of blood stained the frame. This restraint forced tension to build through atmosphere alone. Every creak of a floorboard, every flicker of candlelight, and every unexplained sound carried weight because nothing else competed for attention. The absence of visual shocks made the psychological unease far more potent. Critics initially questioned whether modern audiences would accept such a quiet approach, but the gamble paid off brilliantly. The film proved that terror didn't require spectacle, just careful craftsmanship and patience. By rejecting gore, Amenábar created a horror experience that felt timeless rather than trendy. Number 2. Kidman's nightmares during filming. Reading the script for the first time left Nicole Kidman deeply shaken. The central revelation that Grace had ended her children's lives before taking her own disturbed her so profoundly that she began experiencing nightmares. She seriously considered withdrawing from the project, unsure whether she could emotionally handle portraying a mother capable of such an act. Amenábar recognized her distress and worked closely with her to reframe the role. He helped her understand Grace not as a villain, but as a woman consumed by war-induced trauma, religious terror, and overwhelming isolation. By focusing on the character's vulnerability, Kidman found a way to channel her fear into something powerful. The nightmares didn't stop entirely, but they became part of her process. That raw emotional turmoil translated directly onto screen, giving Grace's breakdown an authenticity that no amount of technical acting could replicate. Kidman later described the role as one of the most emotionally demanding of her career. Number 3. The original ending was a shock. Early drafts of the screenplay revealed the truth about Grace and her children in a far more conventional manner. The original ending spelled out the revelation through dialogue and exposition, making the supernatural twist explicit and straightforward. Test readers found it effective but emotionally hollow, lacking the devastating impact Amenábar wanted. He spent months reworking the finale, determined to make it quiet, sorrowful, and emotionally resonant rather than merely shocking. The new version allowed the truth to unfold gradually through the séance scene, with Grace realizing her own fate at the same moment the audience does. The rewrite transformed the entire film's architecture. What had been a clever twist became a tragic revelation, one that reframed Grace's protective instincts and the children's fear in heartbreaking new ways. The softer, more introspective ending proved far more memorable, turning a good ghost story into something genuinely haunting. Number 4. Director didn't speak English. Leading an English-language production presented a unique challenge for Amenábar, who spoke very limited English at the time. He relied heavily on translators during pre-production, but once filming began, verbal communication became nearly impossible. His cast and crew wondered how he would convey complex emotional directions without a shared language. Amenábar adapted by developing an entirely visual approach. He demonstrated blocking physically, acted out emotional beats himself, and conducted extended rehearsals where meaning emerged through gesture rather than explanation. His inability to give detailed verbal notes forced him to communicate purely through tone and atmosphere. This limitation became an unexpected asset. His outsider perspective freed him from English-language horror conventions, and his reliance on visual storytelling strengthened the film's eerie tension. Cast members later admitted that his unconventional methods pushed them to focus more on physical performance and emotional truth. Number 5. Filmed in Spain, not the islands. Despite being set in the Channel Islands off the British coast, not a single frame of the others was shot in the United Kingdom. The entire production took place in northern Spain, at the Palacio de los Hornillos in Cantabria. Financial incentives and weather patterns made Spain the practical choice, but transforming a Spanish estate into a convincing British manor required extensive work. The production design team studied period-appropriate British architecture obsessively. They imported specific fabrics, reworked interior details, and carefully controlled every visible element to maintain the illusion. Spain's frequently overcast skies and misty coastal climate worked perfectly for the film's perpetually gloomy atmosphere. The remote location also served the story thematically. The estate's genuine isolation mirrored Grace's emotional separation from the outside world. That sense of being cut off from everything else seeped into the film itself, making the manor feel like a place truly removed from time and reality. Number 6. Real disorder inspired the kids. The children's extreme photosensitivity wasn't a purely fictional invention. Amenábar based their condition loosely on xeroderma pigmentosum, a rare genetic disorder that makes sunlight extremely dangerous to those affected. He wanted the medical detail to feel authentic rather than fantastical, grounding the story's supernatural elements in something real. This choice influenced every aspect of production. The costume department dressed Anne and Nicholas in heavy protective clothing even indoors. Cinematographers kept lighting levels deliberately low throughout filming, creating a visual style that felt both medically necessary and atmospherically oppressive. The medical realism also served a clever narrative purpose. By establishing a logical reason for the perpetual gloom and sealed curtains, Amenábar disguised the true nature of the household. Audiences accepted the darkness as necessity rather than questioning why these characters existed in eternal shadow, making the eventual revelation all the more devastating. Number 7. A mansion rumored to be haunted. Strange occurrences began almost immediately after the crew settled into the Palacio de los Hornillos. Multiple team members reported unexplained noises echoing through empty hallways late at night. Lights flickered without apparent electrical cause, and several people described overwhelming sensations of being watched in certain rooms. The reports intensified as filming progressed. Sound technicians picked up whispers and footsteps on their equipment that hadn't been audible during takes. One crew member refused to work alone in the basement after experiencing what she described as an intense cold spot and feeling of dread. Amenábar dismissed supernatural explanations entirely, attributing the incidents to old wiring, acoustic quirks, and overactive imaginations fueled by the film's subject matter. Whether genuine paranormal activity or collective suggestion, the eerie environment undeniably influenced the production's mood, adding an authentic layer of unease that permeated every scene. Number 8. Flanagan shaped Mrs. Mills. Fionnula Flanagan didn't simply perform the role as written. She actively collaborated with Amenábar to craft Mrs. Mills's peculiar blend of warmth and unsettling awareness. During rehearsals, she proposed specific line changes and behavioral adjustments that made the character seem simultaneously comforting and quietly ominous. Her most significant contribution involved the character's stillness. Flanagan insisted that Mrs. Mills move less than normal people, maintaining an almost supernatural calm even in tense moments. She adjusted her vocal rhythms to sound measured and deliberate, creating the impression of someone carefully choosing every word. The performance required remarkable restraint. Flanagan had to hint at the character's true nature without revealing it, walking a tightrope between helpful servant and something more mysterious. Her suggestions elevated Mrs. Mills from a supporting role to one of the film's most memorable elements. Number 9. Eccleston's strange disappearance. Christopher Eccleston's availability for the project was severely limited due to other commitments. His entire role had to be filmed in just a few compressed days, forcing the production to rush through scenes that required deep emotional complexity. The brief shooting schedule meant his character appeared and vanished from the story almost as quickly as he arrived on set. This tight time frame created an unintentional narrative benefit. His fleeting presence on screen mirrored the character's mysterious nature perfectly, making his arrival feel dreamlike and uncertain. The rushed quality added to the sense that something wasn't quite right about his visit. Eccleston's emotional detachment in the role, whether intentional or a byproduct of the compressed schedule, fit the film's bleak tone remarkably well. His hollow performance suggested a man fundamentally changed by war, or perhaps something even more disturbing. The brevity of his screen time left audiences with more questions than answers. Number 10. The fog was all artificial. Every wisp of the thick, shifting fog surrounding the estate was produced artificially using industrial fog machines. The effects team worked constantly to maintain consistent coverage, manipulating density and movement to create an atmosphere of perpetual obscurity. Natural mist was too unreliable, so they engineered their own weather to ensure the manor remained perpetually shrouded. The fog served multiple practical purposes beyond atmosphere. It obscured sightlines and created depth in outdoor shots, making the limited location feel more expansive. The crew adjusted fog levels between takes to control visibility precisely, using it as both a visual effect and a storytelling tool. Symbolically, the fog represented the family's blurred understanding of their own situation. Just as the mist prevented them from seeing beyond their immediate surroundings, their inability to accept the truth kept them trapped in confusion. The artificial weather became a visual metaphor for denial and the murky boundary between the living and the dead. Number 11. Séance based on real history. Amenábar immersed himself in historical accounts of Victorian séances before filming the climactic scene. He studied photographs, written descriptions, and survivor testimonies to recreate the period's spiritualist practices with meticulous accuracy. Every detail mattered, from how participants positioned their hands to the specific phrasing mediums used. The research influenced blocking and performance throughout the sequence. Actors maintained rigid postures that reflected Victorian formality. The dialogue incorporated authentic spiritualist terminology rather than modern interpretations. Even the breathing patterns and silence were drawn from documented behaviors. This commitment to historical authenticity made the scene feel disturbingly real rather than theatrically staged. Audiences familiar with actual spiritualist practices recognized the accuracy, while others simply felt the weight of something genuine unfolding. The attention to detail transformed a generic supernatural moment into the film's most powerful sequence. Number 12. Kidman studied 1940s film stars. Nicole Kidman didn't approach Grace as a contemporary woman in period clothing. She meticulously studied actresses from the 1940s, particularly Deborah Kerr and Celia Johnson, analyzing their vocal patterns, physical movements, and emotional restraint. She wanted Grace to embody the era completely, not just wear its costumes. Kidman incorporated the clipped diction and precise enunciation common in British films of that period. Her posture remained rigidly controlled, reflecting the physical deportment expected of upper-class women during wartime. She limited her gestures and facial expressions, channeling the emotional reserve that characterized performances from that era. These choices created subtle dissonance that hinted at something deeper. Grace's mannerisms felt slightly removed from reality, as if she belonged to a different time entirely. The performance existed at a careful distance, creating an almost ghostly quality that audiences couldn't quite identify, but definitely felt. Number 13. Servants nearly revealed early. Earlier script drafts exposed the servants' ghostly nature far sooner in the story. The original structure included a midpoint revelation that would have explained Mrs. Mills, Mr. Tuttle, and Lydia's true identities before the film's second half. Producers initially supported this approach, believing audiences needed earlier answers. Test readings revealed a major problem. Once the servants' nature became clear, the story lost much of its tension and mystery. Audiences stopped questioning what they were seeing and simply waited for the next plot development. The premature explanation drained the film's carefully constructed atmosphere of uncertainty. Amenábar fought to delay the revelation until the finale, restructuring the entire screenplay around a single, devastating moment of truth. The change required rewriting dozens of scenes to plant subtler hints without explicit confirmation. The revised structure kept audiences guessing throughout, transforming the servants into an unsettling presence that defied easy categorization. Number 14. Grace's curtain walk shot. The iconic moment when Grace walks through billowing curtains required precise technical coordination to achieve its unsettling effect. The production team installed carefully positioned fans at specific angles to create the fabric's eerie drift. Lighting technicians spent hours adjusting angles to ensure shadows moved across the material in ways that felt both natural and subtly wrong. The shot required multiple takes to capture the exact quality of movement Amenábar envisioned. Too much air made the curtains flap dramatically rather than drift mysteriously. Too little left them hanging limply without the ghostly quality the scene demanded. Finding the perfect balance took an entire afternoon of adjustments. The visual effect carried symbolic weight beyond its aesthetic impact. Grace literally walks through barriers that should remain solid, visually representing her crossing into uncomfortable truths. The moment marks a turning point where she can no longer maintain the illusions protecting her from devastating knowledge. Number 15. Directing the children carefully. Amenábar made a deliberate decision not to tell the young actors the full truth about the story's ending. Alekina Mann and James Bentley knew their characters were afraid and isolated, but they didn't understand why those fears had such foundation. The director guided their performances through mood rather than comprehensive explanations. This approach preserved genuine reactions throughout filming. The children's confusion and fear on screen remained authentic because they experienced similar emotions during production. Amenábar communicated through tone, creating an environment where the young performers responded naturally to what they felt. The method proved particularly effective during the finale. When the truth emerges, Anne and Nicholas's reactions carry real weight because the actors experienced a parallel revelation. The performances feel raw, capturing genuine emotion that adult actors might have calculated. By protecting the children from knowledge, Amenábar preserved innocence that made the ending more heartbreaking. Number 16. Scenes lit only by candles. The film relied heavily on real candlelight for numerous interior scenes, creating soft, unstable shadows that flickered across walls and faces. This wasn't simply an aesthetic choice, but a technical challenge that pushed the cinematography team to their limits. Traditional film stock required significantly more light than candles naturally provided. Cinematographer Javier Aguirre Sarobe developed specialized techniques to capture usable footage under such low lighting. He used faster film stocks, wider apertures, and longer exposure times to compensate. Actors had to remain remarkably still during takes to avoid motion blur, adding an unintentional stiffness that enhanced the eerie atmosphere. The candlelight created an intimacy and authenticity that artificial lighting couldn't replicate. Shadows moved organically, flames wavered unpredictably, and the warm glow contrasted with the cold atmosphere. The technique gave the film a visual texture that felt genuinely historical rather than merely costume. Number 17. Whispering sound tricks. The sound design team employed subtle psychological tricks throughout the film, layering barely audible whispers, footsteps, and breaths just beneath the conscious hearing threshold. These sounds weren't meant to be clearly identified, but rather to create subliminal unease. The human brain registers these near imperceptible audio cues even when listeners can't consciously identify them. Sound designer Carlos Faruolo spent weeks testing different frequencies and volumes to find the precise level where sounds influenced emotion without becoming obvious. He placed whispers in stereo channels that seemed to move around the theater space, creating the sensation of presences just out of sight. The technique proved remarkably effective at elevating tension without obvious manipulation. Audiences reported feeling watched during certain scenes without understanding why. The subliminal sound cues guided attention and created persistent anxiety that built throughout the film. Number 18. Atmosphere instead of jump scares. The film deliberately avoids traditional jump scares, rejecting the sudden loud noises and quick cuts that dominated horror cinema at the time. Amenábar believed that shock tactics provided momentary thrills but undermined genuine dread. Instead, he constructed tension through sustained atmosphere, letting fear accumulate gradually. This approach required confidence that audiences would accept slower pacing and more ambiguous threats. Every scene builds unease through composition, sound, and performance rather than startling reveals. The horror emerges from anticipation and uncertainty, from knowing something is wrong without being shown exactly what. The stylistic choice made the film feel psychologically mature rather than merely entertaining. Viewers experienced genuine unease that lingered between scenes. By trusting atmosphere over manipulation, Amenábar created a horror experience that respected audience intelligence and delivered emotional impact far deeper than any momentary shock. Number 19. A breakthrough for Spanish production. The Others became one of the most commercially successful Spanish-backed films ever made, earning over $200 million worldwide, against a modest $17 million budget. This financial triumph demonstrated that Spanish production companies could successfully co-finance major English-language projects that competed internationally. The achievement boosted confidence throughout Spain's film industry. The success elevated Amenábar's profile from respected national filmmaker to internationally recognized director. Hollywood studios began pursuing him for projects, and his ability to craft compelling English-language cinema, despite language barriers, impressed observers worldwide. Beyond individual achievement, the film's performance encouraged increased investment in Spanish co-productions. It showed that European financing could support commercially viable international releases. The success opened doors for future collaborations and demonstrated Spain's capacity to contribute meaningfully to global cinema. Number 20. The estate's real-life history. The Palacio de los Hornillos carried its own layered history that influenced the production's atmosphere. The estate had served various purposes throughout the 20th century, including periods as a private residence, temporary military facility, and extended abandonment. Years of neglect had left certain sections weathered, requiring minimal alteration to appear genuinely haunted. Production designers incorporated the building's authentic decay rather than fighting against it. Cracked plaster, water stains, and worn surfaces added texture that set departments couldn't easily replicate. The mansion's genuine age lent credibility to the film's 1945 setting. The estate's real past resonated with the fictional story in unexpected ways. Cast and crew felt the weight of history within those walls, experiencing the building as a genuine repository of memory. This psychological connection between real and fictional history created an atmosphere that influenced performances and crew morale. Number 21. Kidman's most emotional scene. The photo album sequence required Nicole Kidman to access profound vulnerability and grief in a compressed emotional space. Amenábar deliberately isolated her from the rest of the cast before filming, keeping her alone in a quiet room to build psychological intensity. He wanted her genuinely shaken and emotionally raw when cameras rolled. The scene drew inspiration from authentic Victorian death photography, a practice where families photographed deceased loved ones as final keepsakes. Amenábar showed Kidman actual historical examples to help her understand the period's relationship with mortality. The photograph's haunting quality informed her reaction, grounding the moment in historical reality. This sequence marks Grace's breaking point, the moment when her carefully maintained control finally shatters. Kidman's performance captures complete psychological collapse with devastating authenticity. The rawness came from genuine emotional exhaustion rather than technical acting, creating one of the film's most heartbreaking moments. Number 22. Multiple versions of the reveal. The séance climax was filmed multiple times with drastically different emotional intensities and tones. Amenábar shot versions ranging from angry and defiant to confused and desperate, exploring every possible emotional register for the moment when Grace confronts the truth. Each take offered a different interpretation of how someone might react to such devastating knowledge. After reviewing all the footage, Amenábar selected the quietest, most sorrowful version for the final cut. He rejected louder, more dramatic takes in favor of something heartbreaking and introspective. The chosen performance emphasized tragedy over shock, focusing on Grace's emotional devastation. The alternate versions would have fundamentally changed the film's tone. A defiant Grace would have made the ending feel combative rather than tragic. A confused Grace would have seemed less aware of her situation's full weight. By choosing sorrow and acceptance, Amenábar ensured the finale remained emotionally devastating. Number 23. Ending once had more ghosts. Early conceptual drafts included additional spirits connected to the estate's extended history. These phantom figures would have populated the manor's halls, representing centuries of deaths and unfinished business tied to the property. The expanded supernatural mythology aimed to create a richer, more layered ghost story. Amenábar eventually stripped these elements away entirely. He recognized that additional ghosts distracted from the central emotional story and diluted the film's intimate focus. The core tragedy belonged to Grace and her children, and expanding the supernatural population weakened that concentrated impact. The decision to keep the story small proved crucial to its effectiveness. By limiting the ghostly presence to just the family and servants, Amenábar maintained tight narrative focus. The restraint created a more personal, devastating experience rather than a sprawling supernatural mythology that prioritized spectacle over emotional truth. Number 24. Score written before filming. Amenábar composed key musical themes months before production began, an unusual reversal of typical film scoring processes. As both a director and composer, he understood how music would shape the film's emotional rhythms and wanted those themes influencing creative decisions from the start. The early compositions became foundational to how scenes were conceived. During filming, Amenábar played his musical themes on set to establish mood and pacing for cast and crew. Actors performed with the score in mind, understanding the emotional tenor their scenes would carry. Cinematographers framed shots considering how music would interact with visual rhythms. The pre-composed score influenced editing choices significantly. Amenábar cut scenes to match musical phrasing and emotional beats already established in his compositions. This reversed workflow created unusual cohesion between soundtrack and visuals, making music feel inseparable from the storytelling rather than added afterward. Number 25. A surprise box office breakout. The Others didn't open at number 1 or dominate its first weekend. Instead, the film built momentum gradually through exceptional word of mouth and sustained audience interest. Viewers told friends, critical praise accumulated, and theatrical runs extended far beyond initial projections. The steady climb demonstrated genuine audience connection. The film ultimately grossed over $200 million worldwide, making it one of the highest-grossing Spanish-backed films in history. This commercial success surprised studio executives who had modest expectations for a slow-burn horror film without gore or jump scares. The numbers proved that audiences craved intelligent, atmospheric horror. The financial performance validated Amenábar's artistic choices and demonstrated that horror didn't require spectacle to succeed commercially. The film's lasting popularity on home video and streaming confirmed its status as a modern classic that remains a touchstone for filmmakers seeking psychologically sophisticated, supernatural cinema. Even after more than 2 decades, The Others remains a masterclass in slow-burn supernatural storytelling, a film built on quiet dread, emotional depth, and atmospheric precision. From Nicole Kidman's nightmares to Amenábar's language barriers, from artificial fog to authentic Victorian séance research, every element contributed to creating something genuinely haunting. The film proved that horror didn't need gore or jump scares to terrify audiences, just patience and atmosphere. The production's challenges became strengths, and deliberate choices about pacing defied mainstream expectations. The Others succeeded because it trusted audiences to embrace stillness over spectacle, proving that the most effective scares come from what remains unseen. If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of the most effective psychological horrors, be sure to like and subscribe for more film explorations. Which hidden truth about The Others surprised you the most? Tell us in the comments below.